the biggest epiphany I ever came to, and I think it's the most empowering one as well, is when I realized that everything that I need, I have within. You know, when you're searching for answers exogenously, right? I need a new nose that somebody else is going to put on me, right? I need a new cream to make my skin white, right? I need a new powder to make my muscles jacked. No, you need to do more work.
What's up, guys? This time I sit down with Adam Nathan Fleury. Adam is a combat veteran of the U.S. Army, a Steel Mace Flow Educator, a certified primal health coach, a practitioner of Muay Thai and JiuJitsu, and somebody that I consider a friend. I met Adam last summer when I signed up for a knife defense course that was held at his gym in Plattsburgh, New York, called Northeastern Primal Life. After this course, Adam gave me the gift of the Steel Mace, and we have remained connected ever since. This conversation goes wide and deep. We get into some wild times of Adam and his comrades in the U.S. Army, including a wild story of Adam's 21st birthday. We get into Steel Mace Flow, addiction, living in Thailand, taking ownership over your actions, working through fear, and more. You can find Adam at northeasternprimallife.com, at adam.nathan.smf on Instagram, and he teaches Steel Mace Flow at steelmaceflow.com. To support this podcast, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, share an episode with a friend, or subscribe to us on patreon.com/AUXORO for bonus content and early releases of the podcast. Without further ado, please enjoy this deep dive with Adam Nathan Fleury. All right, Adam Nathan Fleury, thank you for joining me for the podcast. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time, and I'm excited to get into some things. So
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to get into is your time in the Army, and we spoke a little bit about that last time when I actually was up in Plattsburgh at your place about 9 months ago now for the knife defense seminar. And so we spoke briefly about that and about your background. And listening to other podcasts you've been on, I've heard some interesting stories from that time. And I thought a good place to start with for your experience in the Army would be your 21st birthday and what you were doing when you turned 21, because you did not have the typical 18 to 21-year-old college experience. So I thought for me and for other people to get a taste what you were going through at the time, where were you when you turned 21? What was going on? What were you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know we just hashed on this before the recording kicked off, but thanks again, brother, for having me. This is awesome to have this conversation with you, and thanks so much for training along with the Mace Dojo, and Zach and I been connected with Mace and done all that up. So thanks so much, Zach.
Of course.
That story, my 21st birthday. Okay, so I was, let's see here. I deployed to Iraq in September of 2003. So this is several months after the ground force-led invasion to take the country. And so it was a sporadic period where things had, from a military standpoint, where a national military like the Iraqi military had been dissolved. And those fighting forces, especially the leaders, some of the officers and the higher ranking enlisted and things like that, started to form their own separatist groups and Ba'ath Party members. And this was the insurgency in the very infancy. And I showed up in September of that with the 10th Mountain Division. And so I was 20 years old at the time, and my 21st birthday wasn't until July 1st. So that was deep into the deployment. It was actually into my second deployment into Iraq. So I remember I was in this, it's a power plant. It's a thermal power plant where essentially they burn oil for electricity. Okay. And I got some stories about that as well. But we're at this FOB, right? And the name of it was FOB Chosen, and it eventually became FOB Musaib, Forward Operating Base Musaib. And it was on the Euphrates River, and we had occupied a a hard structure. I'm not sure what it was before, what it would have been used as for the operation of the plant. But when we got there, it was pretty much abandoned, or maybe it was an admin building or something, and we used it for our platoon headquarters. And I remember being in that building, and I don't know if we were in mission prep or what we were doing, but we were in the wire, which means inside the compound for the day, and we were just going about our usual business, and people were from my platoon were coming by and, like, wishing me happy birthday and things like this. Everybody knew it was my birthday, and the joke is, like, if you turn 21 in Iraq, right, you can't crack the bottle or drink. And at the time, I have a long history and a steep dive into alcohol over the years after that. But up until that point, I hadn't really experimented or really drank a lot of alcohol, and everybody was bruising me.
That was a running joke where if you turned 21 in Iraq, you had to wait to crack the bottle. You weren't allowed to do it while you were deployed there.
Yeah, you're not allowed to drink on deployment. I mean, there are some stories of some NCOs and stuff getting bottles off the gate guards, or getting bottles off the locals down by the gate and stuff like that. There's a black market everywhere.
Yeah, like under the table.
Exactly. And those stories were some of those stories are just like pure and complete comedy. Just picture like soldiers surviving and doing their thing at war, but also trying to act like 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds and 25-year-olds, like in the brief moments they have sometimes. So I was in the we were all around the house we had acquired, and around the yard and stuff, doing typical platoon stuff, cleaning weapons, cleaning gear, fortifying things, doing stuff like that, when we had this, at the time we were getting like pretty heavy volleys. For the time, they were heavy, incoming, right? So rocket and mortar combined fire. So the rockets were usually like, they had 107s they would use a lot. So, and they would sometimes bump it up to like 120s. So those are fairly small rockets. You'll see a lot of them used in the Israeli conflict and stuff like that. So they launched, I think there was 80 or 90 of them on that day. Anyways, we all run for cover, run inside the building, and here I am. You pick a door frame, right? Because that's like the hardest part. So here I am, hunkered in a door frame, and then right across from me is another bedroom, and my team leader's in that door frame. There's a door frame. We're all joking and like, ha ha ha. Like, can we swear on this?
Oh yeah, 100%. No, watch your fucking language on this podcast.
All right, very well. Yeah. So the expletives were running wild, and I'm like, fucking 21st birthday in a doorway in some pump house in Iraq, as the steel rain was falling outside. So that was my turn to 21, and then it was business as usual as soon as that ended. So.
Yeah, that's wild. I was thinking about the dichotomy of our 18 to 21, 22-year-old experience when I was listening to interviews and from the little bit that I learned from you last year and just through the dojo. And I kept thinking how the sense of danger didn't really become real to me that's around the world until I started learning about it and seeking it out on my own through listening to people like yourself or other people like, Jocko, David Goggins, that are willing to talk about the shit that goes across overseas. And it didn't really start to enter my psyche on a regular basis that, there's a reason why evil doesn't typically come over to the United States in a devastating fashion, is because there are people on the other side of the world that are putting their lives on the line, literally, and celebrating their 21st birthdays and younger than that, while people are shooting at them, shit's blowing up around them. And I'm sitting in a college anthropology class, about to celebrate my 21st birthday, going to a bar in Richmond, and so Yeah, it's. I guess I was leading up to. You mentioned the obtaining of alcohol. Some funny stories that would go along with that, and that goes along with any 21st birthday. I guess maybe unless you're Amish or you choose not to
Right.
consume. It usually involves some crazy stuff with alcohol. So, are there any funny
Yeah.
stories or standout times of guys kind of under the table getting booze and normal relieving of stress, just fucking off and having a good time?
Yeah, absolutely. And a note on that, I once had a Lebanese teacher, and extremely smart man, and a doctorate in marketing. So he's really into the marketing world and things like that. And he would often tell me, he's like, in Lebanon, and this is the case in other places. Like I lived in Thailand, I lived in Philippines for years. And stayed in a lot of other countries, and a lot of other countries don't have that culture. He was saying, like, as early as like 7 or 8 or 10, oftentimes like Lebanese children, when the family gathers, will have a little alcohol, and they'll realize what it is. And it's like, okay, this is what the adults sometimes are getting a little wild on, and the adults even don't get. It's not the same case as you see in America. I guess the culture was his words and sentiment on that. And I would say some places around the world, that's the traditional culture is very much like that. Although, as the American way pervades into places like in the Philippines are they love Americans. They're very much Filipino cultured. They have a lot of American, I would say, subtleties among their culture. So that's definitely an American tradition, an American culture, and I didn't go to seek and getting that then, but there were some stories, like even in that same camp. These dudes I knew. So I came from Charlie Company, right? A little background and hierarchy here. Our FOB was controlled by a battalion, and a battalion's about 500 plus or minus, combat ready soldiers in different positions. And it was an infantry battalion, so you had 3 infantry companies, so like 150, 200 men or so. And then you have a support or a headquarters company that does, things like mortars, anti-tank operations, snipers, reconnaissance, that type of stuff. And so I had come from Charlie Company, which is like a line company. I came from that before I went to reconnaissance selection for, our division in 10th Mountain. And when I went from Charlie Company, I'd made a bunch of friends there, and these are the stories I got off these guys. And when they would pull gate guard by the main gate and stuff, right? They're sitting there, and these guys would always try to come up, right? And they have to go through the thing, but they work there so long that they know, okay, this is Marvin, this is Bob, whatever they're calling these guys, right? And not the real names. And they're coming up trying to sell them things. Would you take this? They're trying to sell them different silks and different rugs and things they make, because it's still a business market, right? They got to live in this war zone, and they're still trying to, they're not insurgents or anything. They're just trying to make a buck. And it was one buddy of mine, he tells me later, he's like, yeah, dude, he comes up and he's like, no, I don't want any of that stuff, man, but you think you're giving me a bottle of Jack Daniels? And the guy's like, yeah, I think I can find something for you. I'll figure it out. And he comes back like the next night or the next time they were on guard duty, they arranged a time, and he comes up with this bottle. And it looks like a clear bottle with brown liquid in it. And he's like, that's not Jack Daniels. There's no label on it, man. What is that? He's like, whiskey. It's whiskey. And he's like, oh, man. And he said he bought it off him and took it into the thing. And he's like, I'm waiting to get off guard, like, later. So when I don't have any duties or responsibilities, and, like, he was going to get with his whole team, right, and share it. This guy is an E5, so he was a sergeant, and everybody under him is either private, corporal, specialist, these, E1 to E4 ranks. And so what does he do? He goes, well, I don't know if this is poison or not. I don't know if they want to kill it. Like, if this guy, is just getting paid to do this. He's like, so I'm going to take a little swig of this and wait like an hour. So he sits there, and he's getting drunk outside the hooch by himself. No poison in it. But when the guy's finally like, yeah, I think long enough's passed, and they come out and start enjoying that with him. So.
Yeah, it's a good point about the alcohol too. That it's right. I've grown up in the American culture, so I'm so used to at least the legally abstaining until 21, and then there's this whole party pop off. I can use I can stop using this fake ID that I've had since 16, and I can go to a bar and use my real ID for real. Where other countries, people get gradually introduced to alcohol at a younger age and probably see a lot of good benefits, I would imagine, with the relationship to alcohol. Not that big of a deal, not built up in your mind. So it's definitely seems like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think alcohol obviously comes with a bag of worms if you get addicted to it or things. But yeah, I think it's the mind thing, right? And you can see the same thing in teenage driving, right? Like here's your card, and what do most teens die from? Well, they die from traffic accidents, I think. It's like right up there. That's right up there, or at least it was a few years ago. So I got some stories too from Baghdad too when I was a contractor, because there was booze stores in Baghdad in the IZ and the Green Zone and stuff. So I've got some stories too from the Green Zone in Baghdad. There was this little Chinese operation. I'm sure it was illegal. They wouldn't be operating. They were operating, and here me and my buddy Dave. Who call sign was Crash, because on the first day on the job he crashed an armored vehicle into an awning. Anyways, that's how you get named sometimes, is when you do something stupid and everybody
and then it sticks with you.
The rest of your career. Yeah, exactly, So here him and I are, I think it was like 9-10 at night, we had gotten off work, we'd been drinking for a bit, we'd been barbecuing in our little camp, and it's like, let's take a little run to the Chinese liquor store. And the Chinese liquor store was like out near checkpoint 1, kind of like, it's inside the wire, inside the Green Zone and all that, but it's super sketch, and it's like, I'm going in to see these Chinese people, which you don't even speak the same language, so I'm like rocking a Glock on my hip, but I'm kind of covered up because I don't want them to think I'm robbing them, and they have to let you through the gate, and you walk into this room, right, and they sell massages too, so they're like, massage? And I'm like, no. I said, you got some wild turkey? And they're like, oh yeah, come back to this room, and I'm like, just kind of like, feeling for my Glock. I was like, all right, we're going to go back into this room. We turn the corner. There's like this big burlap sack covering this massive mound on the floor, right? And she starts peeking up the sack, and she starts pulling bottles of wild turkey. How many you want? We're like, 3. $80 a bottle. So, but yeah, that's the black market.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how some sort of black market exists for our deep primal pleasures throughout the world. Wherever you are, everyone experiences those same desires, and someone's gonna make a business out of it. And so it's funny to hear those types of stories.
Yep. Yeah, so isn't it fascinating? Like, go ahead, Zach. I would have gone down a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, well I wrote down Baghdad and booze, so we can circle back to it later. And I thought that getting into a bit of your background, getting into the Army would be helpful for myself and for listeners too, who may not be familiar with everything that comes with that. So could you tell the story of why you joined the Army, what you specialized in, what your job was, and some of the moving or difficult experiences from that time?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I joined the Army in 2017. I joined before I graduated high school. I just knew I wanted it. I think I knew I wanted it as a child. I was like at 14 years old. I remember I got kicked out of the Marine recruiter office because he thought I was 16, and I was going down there to see him, and I was doing pull-ups on the bar and stuff, like like some kid they want to kick out. Like, what's this kid always here? I lived like a block away too, so it wasn't a far hike, and I worked at a Price Chopper and a couple restaurants around there in Plattsburgh. So you would always walk by the Marine and the Army and all the recruitment offices. So I would stop to the Marine Corps, and they finally found out I was 14. So like, dude, come back when you're 16. Get out of our office. Yeah. I think they can get in trouble for getting caught with like young people there, like brainwashing or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, you know, it didn't turn me off the Marine Corps, but I really wanted to be an Army Ranger. All right, so I went down and saw the Army recruiter when I was like 16, and I was working with him for a little while, and then at 17 I joined, and he's like, you got to finish high school, Adam. I was like, all right, you know, hated high school. High school didn't serve me, you know. The only thing high school really did, went to public school, and the only thing it really did was, you know, teach me how to cheat, steal, rob, like, you know, and basically like find out the ways to slink in and out of getting bullied all day long, you know, or in these type of things, you know. So I hated high school. I was like, you know, oh, they want me to go to college, and this place that I hate that's been keeping me penned up all day long wants me to go to college. Fuck that, you know. So and I grew up my whole life, and I don't know really why. I guess my grandfather was into it a little bit, and my grandfather on my father's side flew planes in World War II, and maybe that has something to do with it. My brother and I grew up reading like Vietnam War era books. We were reading so much. Like we had like 4 and 5 stacked bookshelves full, and the entire thing, the only thing that could be found in there was World War II and Vietnam era and Korean War history books and like and detailed accounts. So I grew up with that sort of sense of patriotic duty and like, I'm going to go do this because people that I read about went and did this for the folks that aren't around anymore, my mother, my grandfather, and they're not here anymore. And, you know, we see monuments of them, and I was super charged by that. You know, I was super inspired. I knew that push comes to shove for some reason. You know, I knew that if things got bad, you could eventually be drafted. And I knew, like, in the Vietnam War and the World War II era drafts, if you had served in the military, then your siblings are not beholden to serve, you know, because they don't want to take too many people from the same family. Mm-hmm. And so that was also a motivator. So when I left for like basic training, boot camp, AIT, all that stuff, for Fort Benning, Georgia, when it was 10 days after I graduated high school. So I graduated in June, late June 20 something, 2001. And so imagine that, right? June 2001, right?
Yeah.
And I knew I was going in the Army, and here I am reading about accounts of men with green faces and SEALs in Nam and Recondo and French resistance fighters in World War II and all this stuff, you know? And so, like, I want to do that stuff. I want to blow shit up. I want to fly out of planes and helicopters. And, like, I'm going in June 2001, and I'm like, man, I hope I give him a chance, you know?
Yeah.
And I leave, and it's a couple months the process. So that it came to September. I was in boot camp. I was in they call it basic in the Army. You know, it's your first 9 weeks, and then they roll you into infantry school, if you're in the infantry or going in the infantry. And then from there, I went on to airborne school, and then Ranger indoctrination program, and it's a pipeline. And so I, in 2001, in September, we were just getting ready for like the rifle range and stuff. So it's not very advanced in like the basic training sense. You have basically done like, they've kicked the shit out of you for 6 weeks. They've made you PT, exercise all day, all night, you know, basically fuck you up. And then they start getting you ready to be disciplined with the rifle. So we're doing like rifle mechanics. We're taking down the rifle. We're stripping it. We're putting it back together. We're cleaning it all day long. We're doing like little firing drills, just basic maneuvering, right, to ensure everybody's safe. And then we're on to the marksmanship portion before we get to the range. So, you know, proper trigger squeeze, point of aim, these types of things, like real basic rifleman stuff. And I remember had like this little TV tube that was allotted to us. So picture 2001, technology isn't what it is now, you know, and backtrack maybe another 15 years. That's what we had for a TV, or 10 maybe years, right? And we had this 20-something inch TV that someone had hooked up to this program the Army was running at the time, which is you put a real M16 rifle and a little box thing in the trigger, and you squeeze the trigger, and they tell you whether you jerked it, whether you pulled it right. They tell you whether you put something in the barrel as well, and it monitored on the you know, think Duck Hunt, but more advanced, right? Did you ever play Duck Hunt?
Yeah,
Nintendo?
yeah. The the with point and shoot video game, just mowing down ducks. Now, I wasn't very good at it, but I played.
Yeah, so it was similar technology. You know, you're pulling the trigger and little silhouettes are coming up and you're not knocking them down, right? And they're telling you, poor trigger squeeze, good trigger squeeze, these type things. Perfect. And somebody runs in the room when we had like a little group doing this, right? And somebody runs in the room, he's like, drop that fucking shit. And he starts jimmying with the TV. We're like, what are you doing, dude? And he goes, I heard something happen. My dad, there's one guy in our platoon, his dad worked in the Pentagon. And he's like, I heard something happen. And he used to do electrical work or whatever. And so he gets around the back of the TV and he grabs somebody's coat hanger thing from inside their locker and he's doing jimmying it. All of a sudden we get a public access news station, right, come up. And as soon as it comes up, we see the World Trade Centers, right, and one's smoking. And we're like, what is this, you know? And like, I'm scratching my head, and like, nothing happened to me yet. I was like, is this a movie? What, dude, why is this guy freaking out and going crazy? And he just put a movie on. Like, if we get caught doing this, we are fucked. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, boom, we saw the live explosion of the second one. And everybody's like, is this real? You know, and then the newscasters and things start happening, and like literally minutes later, we heard one of the drill sergeants' boots like hammering up the stairs, and we're like, "Fuck!" Like people are kind of moving quickly to start hiding the evidence of what we're doing, and he comes in like super somber, and he's like, "Men, parade rest," you know, tells us to get in like a formation near our bunks and all this, you know, and like not pissed off about anything he sees, right? And so instantly, like. I felt like this feeling within me, like, wow, he doesn't care. This is real. Like something just happened, and I have no idea what it is, you know. And shortly after, we got like the whole mood changed from you guys are going to be, you know, ground pounding infantry soldiers. You know, you carry, you have to fill massive shoes. You know, you storm the beaches of Normandy. These things to a good percentage of you will die, man. You know, and that was like 6 or 7 weeks into basic training, and then I realized, like, oh, okay, I got in on the ground floor of this, so let's see where this goes.
Yeah,
so that was my first couple months in basic training, and then, you know, off from there you go through the training in the school pipeline, and eventually get to your unit. I made it to the last phase. Yeah. Was
everything expedited because of 9/11 when that happened? Did they kind of push forward the process of getting you ready?
No. They haven't. They like at the time they had enough of what they needed. In the pipeline, you got, you know, you have. Well, this is how it used to be. I have no idea what it is now. Well, I have a slight idea what it is now, and it's a lot different for sure from when I hear. And you go in, and if you're just an infantry soldier, if you've signed an infantry contract, as soon as you graduate in infantry school, you're going and getting sent to a unit, you know. And if you get sent to that unit and they're deploying in 3 months and they have enough time to train you up, you're going with them. And if you don't have enough time to train up per that unit's, you know, their standards and their metrics, then you stay behind and you start evolving some sort of rear deployment or rear detachment where eventually you could be called in to relieve as people get wounded or whatever, or they need more guys from rotation or whatever, you know. So there was no rushing process back then. You know, they were just basically you saw the situation, just everything increase, security measures increase, protocols go up. I mean, overnight, literally, it went from like a peacetime, you know, people marching, singing cadence as they're running and all this, to literal M2 or Ma-Deuce, like 50 cal machine guns and sandbags on the corners of barracks, like looking like World War II and shit. I was like, what? that went away after we realized we were no longer in like from inbound air attack threat, right? But like that happened overnight, dude. There were like real infantry soldiers while I was training, really guarding us.
I it's crazy because I can go out to my window and see the skyline with the new One World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And I was in second grade when the planes hit the towers on 9/11, and I remember being in a gymnasium, and we're second graders, so we weren't informed on the full realm of what's going on, what's actually happening, and all we knew is that the school was locked down because they weren't sure if there were going to be other attacks, like you said, if something was going to possibly happen on Long Island, or because we were probably about 25 miles away from downtown New York City. And yeah, went home. My parents explained to me what happened, saw the footage on CNN, Fox News, whatever it was. And yeah, it's crazy to hear other people's experiences, especially someone like yourself who was in the Army when it was happening, because everyone kind of has that moment in time where they were during 9/11, especially if you were living in America. For you, what was the immediate vibe like? You said the peace marching kind of went away from within the Army itself amongst you and your brothers alongside you. Were people, chomping at the bit to get over there? Were people, I imagine they were super angry and confused in some way? Like, what was kind of the vibe like from within the Army where you were?
Yeah, that's a great question, Zach. And it's fascinating. Like, how old are you in second grade? Like 7, right? Seven
I think
eight?
it's like 7 or 8, somewhere in there. Yeah, so 8 years old. So I was born in '93.
So yeah, that's fascinating. You and I have a similar memory of, it's just different eras. So I was probably in second grade or around then during the invasion of Desert Storm. That was the first war that I watched on TV. And I remember waking up, going early before class, because my mom worked in a hospital. She worked she washed pots and pans for the first 20-something, 5 years of her career. And then she went and transferred into the pharmacy technician position. So she would leave at 6 a.m. right in the morning. And we would finish up our little, breakfast or whatever we were doing. And then we would walk to the bus pickup. And I remember she would let us watch TV. She would let us watch ESPN. She would let us watch different things right in the morning before to occupy us before we'd go and find the bus. And I remember being addicted, Zach, to watching the lead up to the Desert Storm, because back then on CNN it was 24 hours, and that was the new biz, right? 24 hours news program, and I was always watching. I remember watching these green tracer fire under night vision, right? And I was like, what is this Star Wars? I'm a young kid, and that always stuck in my brain. That and to have lived through that, it's kind of weird, and it's a bit, dude, it's a bit just trippy, just having that vision on the TV and then going live that eventually. But the mindset when that all happened, I have friends that weren't anywhere near the military or the military mindset before 2001, and then months after or a year after, they enlisted in the Marine Corps or in the Army, and they were in some of the heaviest fighting in the Iraq War, also some in the Afghan War. So I know definitely some people were pushed straight into the military from those actions. And then myself, I remember having a memory, Zach. Remember I talked to you at the beginning of this, how a company's made up, right? Let's say 200 guys, 150 guys for a round number. Okay, so in basic training, you have 4 platoons, right? Let's call them Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Okay, so you have 4 platoons. Well, 2 of those platoons are straight line infantry. So once they're done training, you're all training together in infantry school. Once they're done training, half of the whole company goes to different units that are infantry. And then there's another platoon that's airborne. So they're going to the 82nd or the 101st. And then there's the platoon, which I was in Delta. So Delta platoon is going to airborne school, then into Ranger selection. And that's my platoon. And I remember having the thought, as soon as that shit happened and we're standing in formation, I'm like, fuck this, I want to go right over in that platoon, whoever's going over there first. Yeah. That was my instant mindset. I was like, I want to not continue training. I want to go. This is exactly what I signed up for. And I'm glad it played out the way it did. I don't know how that would have went. So I'm glad I stayed where I was at, but I do have that. I did have that thought, that whole thought process, like, oh, dude, I came to play in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl's here. Time to get off. Time to go there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So it was this pretty rapid shift from peacetime to wartime mindset from within the Army. Obviously, things turning over pretty quickly. So you were also a contractor after you were honorably discharged, and I didn't know what I kind of knew what a contractor was in the movie sense, but I didn't know kind of the ins and outs of the actual job until I did some research on it to prepare for this interview. Could you explain to people what a contractor is and how it's different from being in the Army? Yeah,
absolutely. So, there's some
I think it's fascinating.
There's some pretty good linear histories out there of the contracting industry. All right, let's think about it like this. All right, if you understand corporations, you understand contracting, and everybody out there understands. If you're from America, you understand corporations because they're running the country. All right, so if you understand corporations, like, that's the structure. All right, so if Zach and I get on a project, right, to go build a new set of condos or whatever, right, we're going to bid certain contractors to build that, right? We're going to bid, concrete guys to do that, and we got to find the price for it, the price point, and we're going to look at the reputation, right? And we're going to look at how well they build to code. Let's say ABC Group, who does framing, they build just within code, right? And that's what we're going to pay for. And so there's a mixed bag there. And the contracting world in military is much the same, all right? You have the top tier, top echelon folks, and you pay what you get for it. And a lot of the U.S. government missions abroad now are driven by these entities, and they're filled with ex-soldiers, they're filled with ex-Marines, ex-soldiers, ex-Navy SEALs, ex-combat forces characters. And you make a good paycheck. I used to make like almost 200. The best paying job I was ever in, I almost made $200,000 a year. I was 23. So
that's some great spending power. 23 years old.
You have no idea, dude. And I lived in Thailand, dude. So, and I didn't like stuff. Still don't. Like, I give most of the stuff I have away. So, like, here's a guy who doesn't like trucks, doesn't like houses, doesn't like the finer things in life, and I'm just swimming in money. So, I couldn't give it away fast enough. I couldn't buy experiences, and that's what I really went in hard with. I just wanted to live, man. Another story for another time. But like the contracting industry, it's the same thing you'll get, especially in like those early days. So in '99, there's a very famous stories out there. Have you ever watched the movie Blood Diamond?
Yes. Yeah, with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. So that's based on I think it's loosely based on a group called Executive Outcomes, and they were in the late '90s in Central Africa. Okay, and I don't know if they were in Mali or not, but I know they were in Central Africa, and they were in Rhodesia too, or former Rhodesia. Now, what is it, Zimbabwe, right?
I think so.
So they were there, and they had really good success, albeit I don't know what the point of view or perspective was from the ground, like from the locals and the people on the ground. But they had a very successful outcome for their mission from the corporate and the government side. So that sort of accelerated this mindset of, okay, they saw the example of Vietnam. They saw what was happening in Somalia, right? Somalia didn't turn out well for us. Now it turned out well in the tactical sense. We won Somalia. Like only 18 soldiers, I think, or 19 were killed in that action during the Mogadishu, the Black Hawk Down incident. But they realized that can't be spread across the papers anymore. We can't have like whole platoons of Rangers and stuff dying in these interdictions and in these diplomatic missions. So they went and agencies started opening up, not agencies, but like companies started opening up, like Executive Outcomes, and modeling it on that. You have like all these agencies are out there. I don't know what the names are called anymore, but like Aegis, you had Z and Blackwater, you had Triple Canopy. They're still a real thing. Global, and they all have a similar structure in an organization, based somewhat in corporate America and based somewhat in the military, the organization set up, and they bid on contracts, and the government decides, okay, we'll give this contract to you over here in Somalia, we'll give you this contract in the IZ in Baghdad to control that, and these guys have to play by an agreed upon set of rules that is written by the State Department or who they work for, Department of Defense, and agreed on the country they're in. In Iraq, I was a contractor mostly in Iraq. I did some contracting in Afghanistan. It was a war zone. So you're writing rules and having guys follow rules in an active place where people are dying by the hundreds and sometimes thousands in a day. That's just a rough scene and a rough scenario. And these guys they're all mostly folks like I was, either a poor kid or a patriotic person or somebody who joined the military and then got out and realized, like, man, I don't fit in well back here. I'm not doing so hot. So let me go back to doing what I know and making a good paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you come out of the Army with a certain set of skills and someone's willing to pay you a couple $100,000 at 23 years old, I'd be like, yeah, fuck yeah, cut me the check and I'll go over and just tell me what to do. And when I was reading about contractors, it sounded almost like a free agent vibe, because I was comparing it to sports and baseball, where someone has a certain set of skills and you can hire them for a specific job. And so you have these guys that are discharged from the Army, and you can pick and choose which ones will fit the operation that you're hiring them for.
Yeah, and there's a story there too. Like in the earlier days, like rules are fast and loose, right? But the standards were much higher. So I got into contracting in 2006, and that's, from a contractor's perspective in Iraq and stuff, that's still the early days, albeit not the earliest days, right? Like there was contractors. I remember being with my unit in Iraq and seeing contractors pull up while I was sitting there with like my rifle or doing whatever for the Army, and they pulled up and eating our chow hall and stuff, and I was like, what is this fucking cowboy? Pulls up with an MP5 and a set of Levi's on and like shades and money falling out of his pockets. No, that's a caricature, but it's similar.
Yeah.
You see like an organized military structure, and then you see these wahoos come in, with their home state Ohio patch on their shoulder and a mohawk and a machine gun, and it's like, oh, okay, that's something. I don't know about that. And
so you didn't have to abide by the same rules as a contractor.
Yeah, well, I mean, these guys, then that's the thing, right? It depends. So I worked on several State Department gigs, right? And for the State Department, things were run, fairly tight, right? They have a diplomatic mission. It's different. They don't want to upset people mostly. They want to bring that diplomatic mission to the area. The uniforms are a little more tight. The protocols. Albeit in Baghdad, that stuff, like, it's a lot of times it was more based on survival and just getting the mission done. But like when I was in Afghanistan as a contractor, that was for the Department of Defense, and it was a little more loose and free, which was nice. That was the best contract I was ever on. The lowest threat, and also the most fun that I ever had. That was 2013-14, and right at the end of the shit or get off the pot time, when I was like, this is destroying my soul, man. I got to get out of here.
Yeah. It is before you got off the pot, are there any moments from that fun time in 13-14 that stand out? Because I was listening to you talk about meeting people like Condoleezza Rice, protecting Dick Cheney. Is there a moment that stands out with you, whether it was, meeting someone cool, something surprising, a period of time as a contractor that just stands out to you above the rest? Yeah,
I think 13-14, man. That was the coolest. That was the coolest, and just, It's a different thing when you're like in fear every single day for your life, and you're, like in Baghdad. I worked in Baghdad in 06, 07, 08, 09. I missed 2010, and then I went down to Basra in 2011 and 2012. So I was in Baghdad for a good chunk there in the mid-thousands, and that was during the Battle of Baghdad years and the Sadr City years and all the stuff that was going on in Baghdad. And like life was like more on a moment-to-moment basis, like you can't really, I mean, you can look around and be like, this is what I always wanted to do. I want to be like a boy with guns and with my friends and hanging out and doing cool shit. But it's like, it's too stressful for that, right? It's like you're not really sitting around and enjoying what you're doing. You're just trying to make it through, and then you're trying to get on leave so you can go and spend the money that you were making and that sort of thing. But by the time 2013, 14 came around, I was working. I was running a team too at that point, which was fun, in a leadership role. Or I eventually got to that position. I didn't start there in Afghanistan, and it was just fun. Like we were on a Marine Corps base. In Helmand, Afghanistan. So we got to blend and work around and with the Marines, and that was super fulfilling, and just get to use like their DFAC and hang out with them a lot, go and use their range. We were also with the British, so the British also owned a compound there. So it was like a little international type community of cowboys, or at least the contractors were cowboys. So we were trading bottles of whiskey for range time. My buddy, who I took the team over, that's a cool story. We used to, like a little undercover call sign or nickname we gave him was the Ukrainian's arms dealer, because if you lift up his bed in his little like trailer room, there was literally dozens of ammo, like cans of ammo and grenades and flares and all these things that we would trade people, because we got a free line on booze, right? So we would trade all these units for their kick-ass weapons or bottles of liquor. So, like that kind of cowboy stuff was going on, and it was just kind of fun rolling around that base, abiding by the rules, but, not really having to be beholden to too many people's rules, as we had a different mission set. We were taking care of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the time as they built these projects around Afghanistan. And, I won't go too much into that, but that was where I saw a big gleaming hole in some of the price tags and the things they were building for the money they were building in. I was like, what? If people knew about this is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was when you got out.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that if you're surrounded by danger, gunfire, shit blowing up, you're going to look for ways to have fun. You're going to look for ways to escape. Can you talk about what it's like to be surrounded by violence constantly and fearful of death? Because I imagine that it's always running in the background in your head at some level, being in a war zone. And I've never experienced anything like that, but I imagine it in some ways rewires your brain, because I haven't had a what I would categorize as a near-death experience, but have been in dangerous situations where it definitely changed me after that, where I think differently. I go through different processes in my head, the way I think. For you, how did being in that constant danger, how did being in that constant fear of death and violence affect you and the way that you think and the way that you go about things?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Zach. And, to start it off, I'm going to say, I think we're all wired for it. We just don't know that, deep down inside, we're all wired for this. As soon as you hear that engine backfire, people are either fighting or flighting, in their own way. And if I didn't, in combat, I started out at a very early age in danger and in fear. So, there were certain points in my childhood that were quite rough. I didn't have some of the best caretakers that I was left in their care, due to just the fact that my mom was a single mother. She took care of my brother and I by herself, and she worked full-time plus days every single day of the week, except for maybe one day on the weekend. So this is like, I grew up like that, and my mother was a saint of a woman. However, she left us in the care with a lot of people that weren't quite saintly. So I had experiences where I don't think I ever knew I was going to die, but I was abused or left in fear or trauma for years, where I started going inside, and I didn't really deal with that stuff, and I hadn't matured yet either. So I remember even a very sophomoric mindset when I first entered combat in 2003. Here I am with our guys, and we have an ego about us as well, right? So every military unit where you have to prove your worth and achieve and achieve and achieve, and then you finally get in and you have to hold a standard, or you're fucking kicked out. You go. If you don't hold the standard, you're kicked down the line to the next one where you meet their standards, right? Mm-hmm. And when you get to a level like that, you have some sort of an ego with you, like, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to kick your ass, and it doesn't really enter until you start seeing some of that stuff, right? And so I remember my first firefight was, I think, about a month and a half after I had deployed. So it was a full month and a half. I did combat missions and different things where I was kind of scratching my head, like, all right, what is combat? I understand the planning side of it. I understand these things, and we're going out on these raids and doing stuff, and what? Then nobody's shooting it. Like, what is this? And then all of a sudden, one day, boom, we're in it. And you're like, oh. And I remember coming back from that, and that was the first time in my life where I didn't feel invincible. I was like, I could die out here. You know what I'm saying? And that changed things. And I think if you're going to take a positive thing out of it, which there's some real positives, like what you're talking about, like you rewired your hardware. So when you come home at night, wherever that is, no matter if it happens to you in New York City or you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old in a combat deployment, and you come home from that deployment, you realize you enter your home and it's like 72 degrees, right? And you're like, oh, wow, this is nice, and you sit down in your chair and you're like, and it's like each little moment and nuance after that, at least if you can nurture it and don't allow it to become perverted or allow it to become abused, then you're really picking up on the finer things in life, and you're realizing, like, okay, this is what life is all about. It's not about being inundated with distractions. It's not about escapism. And that's where I was at for years. Once I realized I could die, and then what did I do? I got hardcore addicted, I'm sure of it, to that fast-paced life, like running and gunning with my buddies, and then we made it, and then running, gunning, and then somebody doesn't make it, and you're like, oh, boo-hoo, and it's like, oh, poor me, woe is me for a while, and I'm gonna fucking get him, and then it's this whole self-feeder, and then I'm running away to Thailand after the fact, after I got out of the military, and I was escaping from that. I never wanted to slow down and look at all this trauma that had been caused to me and I had been causing and all this stuff, So I think the big overarching positive you can pull out of near-death experiences or having this stuff happen, whether it's by your own hand or whether you're a victim, not that I'm, propagating victim mentality, but you can be a victim, just not own that identity, right? Because that was something that hit me in the head. One of the guys in my platoon, who's still a great friend of mine, he looked at me one day and he's like, Adam, do you realize somebody just tried to attempted murder us? And I'm like, I never thought of it like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, dude, but you can look at it like that, right? But it'll start to, I think, develop some sort of victimization mentality. When I flew over here on a C-130, bro, with a M4 and a sniper rifle packed up in a drag bag. I'm not worried about attempted murder, man. So it really is about perception. And once you have those veils lifted, I can do this. However, I need to figure out how to control myself and contain myself, and then after the fact, deal with that, because you can't just run from it, right? You can't just be in those scenarios and then say, that fucking happened, we don't talk about that anymore,
Yeah.
You got to talk about it, man. You have to process it and deal with that and reap the rewards of it. You know, I've often said that, like, the day that, let's call it the day, colloquially right now, okay? So, like, the day this happens to you, or the day it happened to me, or the day, you know, I was driving down the road and all of a sudden, I'm in this. You know, that day you can be thankful for, because the next day of your life is going to be the best day you've ever had. You know?
Yeah. What you said about murder, it's a unique way to put it, because I'd never really thought about that. I've never really thought about it like that, where someone goes out to war and they're surrounded by people that are constantly trying to murder them, even people like kids and people that you may not even think about that are threats. You're in this war zone with people trying to murder you. If I walked down the street right now and some guy pulled a gun on me and tried to murder me, that would be one of the most, if I survive that, like one of the most psychologically devastating experiences of my life. And soldiers are encountering that, you know, maybe dozens of times in a day when they're out on a mission and they're taking gunfire.
Yeah, it's you know, and you know, we signed up for it, so you know, don't allow, and I don't want to like to allow that to make a victim out of it and all that, because I did sign up for that and I did want to do that and I kept signing up for it. However, you have to like actively process that later on. Like, so let's dissect that right now. Like, when I was in combat, and I found this to be the best way for me at the time, I guess, I didn't think about stuff. I compartmentalized a lot. So I didn't necessarily tell me about an IED threat. They tell you about an EFP threat, like these big bombs that penetrate any sort of armor, you know. And you're like, okay, that's out there in that district. Okay, but I'm going to compartmentalize that, right? Because I felt it when I was a younger man, still in the Army, and IEDs were starting to go off on trucks and stuff. I remember one day riding down the road, and then I just started fixating on IEDs, and like I started shaking, and all these things started happening to me. Now, later on, I had long bouts with anxiety, but I didn't understand what anxiety was then. I never felt it. And then I linked it in my brain. I said, aha, if I think about this one thing that might happen to me, I'm not going to get anything else done. Zero. And I'm not doing my job. And that was glaringly obvious to me. I was like, I am not doing my job to the best of my ability. And while I'm thinking about this, so what I'm going to do is not think about it, right? So when you're actually in the action, or when you're actually in the thing, you have to take the big picture view. You know, you have to be like, I'm here. I need to do the best minute to minute that I can do. And it's like, it's being in flow state. It's like being in a heavy game, right? Where you're focused. You can't think about this thing you don't want to happen. It doesn't turn things out very well, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's after the fact realizing, like, okay, that happened to me and I have to process that, right? People tried to murder me and I was there doing things to them. And then the big nugget to get over later in life was, I was in other people's countries, man, running around with a gun. Like, these people were trying to kill me. No fucking shit. You know, like I'd be trying to kill me too, dude. You know, like somebody parachutes into my backyard or somebody drives up in a truck, you better think you got a gorilla in the woods that is coming for you, you know? So
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. If I woke up this morning and there were tanks rolling down Court Street in Brooklyn, I'd be pretty pissed. I'd be like, who the fuck are these people? And
that's right.
Yeah, it's, you mentioned that fear kind of turns something on inside of you, and I've never felt it at the level of being shot at or people trying to kill me. I have felt it in much smaller doses. You know, it's like funny, no matter what state of mind I'm in, whether I'm alert or I'm hungover, whatever, something happens and my body just like turns on and I feel okay, I'm in this state. Well, what am I gonna do with this? And sometimes I do a good job of saying, okay, let me feel this fear run through me and still take care of what I have to do. And there are some times where I feel that fear and then I follow that fear down the rabbit hole and then it kind of freezes me up. And there's a funny example of that. This past weekend, I was out in a yurt in Vermont in the woods, and I know there's wildlife going around, and life comes alive at night when you're out in nature because they don't want to, be around people during the day a lot of times. And
Yeah.
I hear the scratching on the tent. Like, it sounds so much like a human. I'm like, I know it's not, but like, it sounds like some guy's just like clawing the tent right now. And it was probably like some fucking small ass bird or maybe a deer that was walking by. And I convinced myself I was following the fear down the rabbit hole. And this is probably about 3:00 in the morning. And I look out the window and I start seeing shapes. Like, my mind starts seeing like, I'm like, look, like it's someone moving, and it's probably a fucking tree. And for about 30 minutes, I was like at this heightened sense of fear and anxiety running through me. And eventually I was like, you know what, if someone did follow you into the woods for miles and follow you to this, where you're like, I can't, that's out of my control. It's 99.99999%. It's a bird. It's a deer. It's, there are no bears around here. So just fucking stop looking at the window and making images that aren't there.
Yeah, man. And I've had that experience too, where I've literally seen like apparitions and stuff from fear. It wasn't actually there. And so, let's dissect that a little bit and delve into that a little bit, Zach, because fear is a necessary emotion, right? It alerts you, like just like you're saying, maybe you're hungover, maybe you're not in your alpha state or in the place where you operate the best, and all of a sudden that fear kicks on, and now you are, right? You're going to be the very best that you are at that time. And it's like, so that mind kick that fear register on, and the body is alerted, right? And the body knows what to do. The body does right things because it wants homeostasis, right? And if we choose to follow that fear down the rabbit hole of fear, exactly, we're following the emotion that alerted us to the situation into a deleterious state. It's a state you don't want to be in because you're not going to be able to operate your best. And now you start worrying about things that are outside your control instead of using the fear to kick you on and then worrying about regulating all the things within your center, all the things that you can regulate at the moment so that when you have to perform, you can perform. And that is the best way it's going to get. Like you said, if somebody had followed you into the woods and they had done so tactically and they were after you and doing that, and now they're scratching on your tent, dude, you're so far out of the control of that situation. Yeah. So you might as well just sit and breathe and be like, when he comes through, I'm going to use my night jiu-jitsu and Aaron Giannetti knife defense tactics, and Muay Thai skills.
that ran through my head where I felt my fear. I felt the fear in my mind, and then I also felt my body following it and tensing up. And I thought to myself, well, if someone is trying to kill me right now, I'm not going to be in a great state to defend myself, being all tight and breathing heavy like this. Like, it serves me well to just go to bed with a knife on my chest, and if someone comes in, I'll hear it and wake up and like use that fear in the moment and hopefully survive. But if someone tactically followed me in the woods, then we'll see. But
yeah, exactly, right.
It may not be looking too good for me. But that's a good point. It's like you have to be able to relax into that fear with like using the energy and the spark of it without letting it totally overwhelm you, because it is useful to a point. Even before a podcast, I get a little hit of adrenaline where I think this could go so wrong. I could forget how to talk. I could freeze up, and then the excitement kicks in where I'm like, it's exciting because this could go wrong, and it's not a guarantee that this conversation won't go as planned, which oftentimes it doesn't, and that's a great thing. And it's not a guarantee that I'm gonna record a podcast tomorrow, so because something might happen to me today, and this could be my last one. So you better fucking be present and pay attention and use that little hit of fear, that little hit of nervous energy to your advantage.
Boy, that's got to be an exciting part of this gig, huh, Zach? It's going to be like the wild ride. It's just like having conversations and just freedom, right?
Yeah. It's really cool to be able to connect with people, especially over Zoom and video now, with a lot of things not being in person. Starting to get back though, which is great.
That's good.
But this is something that's allowed me, this technology, looking into this camera, this microphone over the past year, to connect with people like yourself and have these fascinating conversations. And every single time, like clockwork, 10, 15 minutes before this anxiety kicks in about, and that kind of like tells me that I care about this. It's like a signal. Like if I didn't feel that, it would be time to do something else. And there may be a day when that happens, hopefully 30, 40 years from now. But that little nervous hit is a signal to me that I try to take it as an excitement. My body knows what my mind already is aware of what's about to happen. And so that's like that little hit I'm getting. And have like things that I go through before: loving kindness, taking some deep breaths, and getting on the mic.
Well, see, and there you go too, and that's beautiful. Like we can train for all that, right, Zach? Like what we did in the knife seminar, just certain various little inputs of how could you instill, how could you insert fear or that catalyst of like a cortisol response and stress hormones, right? How do we insert that into training in a marginal way where we can build it up, right? And there's lots of processes, right? By training martial arts with people, especially for the first time, right? Because when you go out on a limb there and you're like, I'm going to go into this space and check out all, and everybody's staring at you, and they work out here every single day, right? So you're in their house. So it's like you can create these little instances of fear, right? Saying yes to a podcast, even that, it's like it starts to get those processes going. Or like, I can do this, and then you hopefully you have a set of processes in play there. And I think that's the big takeaway that people could use in their own lives, is that if you find that you're reacting as a fearful or anxiety response, and you're not knowing how to deal with that, except for maybe running from it or distancing yourself from it, which maybe that's the best option too, depending on what it is. However, there are protocols and control things that we can do to contain ourselves in these places. And if you don't have any system in place for that, right, you can do it a certain way, right? They have cryo chambers. I don't know if they're open anymore, but they have ice tanks. I just built an ice tank over the weekend. So there's little tools we can do to like, I'm gonna go in that ice tank for 1 minute, and everybody can do it for 1 minute, unless you have some sort of crazy pre-existing medical condition I'm not aware of. Like, you can go in a 32-degree ice tank for 1 minute. Everyone can, without shivering. It's you have the processes and the power to do this, right? Now, if you've never been in an ice tank, the very first thing you're gonna do is get in there, and you just let the whole mind take over, right? Fuck, I can't do this. This is terrible. I want to get out of here. My muscles are locked up. If you just tell yourself, like, I don't have to do that, watch. It'll just go away, and you can relax and start, like, swimming around in that thing, You still got to breathe. You still have to control your physiology and those things. But I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if you don't have a process in place for controlling your own fear, or you're not in a place where you've been tested very much, well, then start going out on a limb and testing yourself. Go find things that you want to do, right? Challenges that you want to do, and start achieving them. And then when you find one that makes you fearful or whatever, like, start journaling what controls that, right? Breath, just presence in the moment instead of anxiety of the future events. Start articulating things around you. Okay, we're in a treed area. There are 15 cars. Those are blue. If you start tuning into reality here, you start realizing I've made the problem in my head most of the time, right?
It's a good point about the cold tank too, the cold tub or cold shower, whatever you have at your disposal. When I was at the yurt this weekend, we had a cold tub, and there was also a sauna on the main property. The guy that built the yurt before
Beautiful.
we made the hike down.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, going back and forth from the sauna and the cold tub, right now there's nothing that I'd rather do than hop into this cold tub, because I've just been in a 200-degree sauna. And so let me remember this feeling of like wanting the cold tub so badly, so I can take this back to Brooklyn and try to channel that when I do the cold showers. And I'm like, because I was like, right now, like, I want this cold tub so badly because my body is on fire. So let me try to like remember this feeling before it goes away, and I hop in, and then I want to go in the sauna again. So it's like, it's a good point. You can relax into the feeling of that tenseness that's building up.
Yeah, what was that like physiologically to you, and when you went from that extreme heat and plunged?
Well, first it made me feel like badass, because
Sure.
I went into the sauna first, and so I stayed in there for about maybe 15, 16 minutes, and then went into the cold tub, and then I got back into the sauna, and I felt like I could stay in forever. And then every time I got back into the sauna, I would last 2-3 minutes more, because my body had the cold temperature. And so I felt badass that the cold was making me feel like I was almost invincible to the heat in a sense. And then eventually, the heat kicks in, and you have to get out. But the actual sensations, I just felt the rush of, I felt like the cold was filling me up in a way that it wouldn't if I had not been superheated by the sauna before. Like, it was just filling me up in all the right places. And then when I got back into the sauna, I got a similar feeling, not as strong as going from not as strong from going cold to hot as hot to cold. Yeah, I definitely still felt a cool, kind of like the tingles of your body getting back to that warmth. But something about going from super hot to super cold really quick, I felt kind of like this is like restoring something in me. Yes.
Like, and that's interesting to hear, because like something about any process that taps me personally into that primal nature within me, right? And all of a sudden, like, you feel like a badass, right? You feel like somebody you always knew you could be, right? And then it's like, and it shows you, you can be that person, at least for a time, right? And it's like, why wouldn't we want to operate like that all the time, right? And like, maybe not live in the heat like that, but, use these little things to pull the very best out of us, right? Because I've found in my own personal experience, like, these catalysts for change or catalysts for strength, however you want to look at them, like an ice tank or a sauna to cold water transition, like, these are tools. But if you allow that to go, like, say, I don't know, 2 years, right, elapse, and you hadn't done anything like that, right? You go back to your life, and your life is fairly stagnant or whatever that is. Not that it's your case, but for someone else. And it's like, you start to, I know in my case, I started to lose some of the lessons of combat even as I became, I attempted school after I got out of the Army. So there's a 6-month lapse from when I came back from Iraq, and then I like transitioned units so I could out-process, because I wasn't re-enlisting and going back. Because my unit was deploying right away to Afghanistan or something like that, and I got out, and so, and I remember like 6 months had gone by. Now I'm in now I'm getting out of the Army, and then another 6 months had gone by, and now I'm in a community college around here, and it was like, so a year had elapsed since all that traumatic stuff. And already it's slipping, right? Already I'm drinking beer more. I'm just sitting around. Like, I've lost that catalyst, that all those lessons, right? I didn't lose them, but I I hadn't reinvested into using the benefits of them. So here I'm taking things for granted again and starting a negative trajectory, you know, and so I think that periodically engaging in those things, not like you always have to go in an ice tank, you know, your life doesn't have to suck. It could be fun.
Yeah.
like you're saying, you know, like that. I'm sure that experience in a year in the mountains or in the woods of Vermont it's an incredibly adventurous thing. And like, you know, it might be hard too, even at the time. Fuck it. You know, when you're 20 years later, 40 years later, when you're telling stories on your podcast, you can tell these stories, you know, and that's an exciting thing to have, like, oh, I got out of that one and it's going to be a good story. Was it fun when I was in it? No.
Yeah.
You know, no.
Exactly. Yeah. So speaking of slipping, I've heard that Thailand is a great place to slip into some more negative behaviors like drugs, alcohol, basically like a party over there. And I've been to Vegas, and I've heard that Thailand can kind of be like Vegas on steroids. And so from your perspective, from your time there, what was Thailand like? Because I know that can also be a haven for a lot of military guys too that are looking to escape. What was your day-to-day life like in Thailand when you were spending time out there and living out there?
Yeah, so this is a little, I guess, less talked about version of the contracting community. But so there's the you know, there's like your typical lot of guys that are in contracting, and that's like some of them have wives and family lives, and they come back to Texas or they go back to Wisconsin or wherever they're from, and they live on their ranch and they do cool shit, and that's their life. They deploy and they miss their family, and then they come back home and they live an Americanized life or whatever that looks like for them. And I was the section of guys that didn't do that. You know, I didn't want to, like, the way I looked at it, man, like after I think I had worked 2 contracts before I went to Thailand, which in each contract I think was, at the time, I think they were 5-month contracts or 6-month contracts, so maybe a year. And then I went to Thailand, and this was 2007, and I got talked into it by one of my best friends that's no longer with us, and he's like, man, you don't want to go back to the States. It takes you like 2.5 days to travel back there when I'm on leave in 8 hours. And I was like, that's a huge selling point. What else? And he's like, well, B, you're going to go back there. And, you know, I'd already been on several leaves from my new contractor life at this time. And he's like, you're going to go back there and you're going to try to hang out with all your old friends, and they're not going to have any time for you, and they're not going to like the stuff you say, and they're not going to have any experience and that was completely my experience. You know, you go back home and you end up scratching your head and saying like, fuck, man, when do I get to go back to work? This is terrible. You know, like I'm you know, constantly waiting on people that don't want to travel across town to hang out with me. And I just came from Iraq, you know, like, so it's that whole thing. And so I went to Thailand and like fell into and engaged with a group of expats and Americans. And there is a small compared to the other countries, but large military presence and like ex-military expats in Thailand that just like they're just done with the American way of life, man. They don't want to live in shopping malls, and they don't want to have some lady bitch at them all day long, you know, and like you know, it's like they were just over it, you know, and they were completely about freedom, and that's what I've always really saying. I like that way of life, you know. And you know, there was a lot of escapism too, though, and you know, the drugs and everything. I mean, Pattaya. I lived in Pattaya for most of my time in Thailand, or just outside Pattaya, with some frequent trips to the jungle and things like that. And I mean, Pattaya back then was I mean, picture a train wreck, and it's like way worse. It's like, you know, here's this place where everyone from around the world comes, and so it's allowed, and then everybody's left scratching their head like they're all here, and so the police have like a side business making money off from all the illegal shit, and the police is the mafia, and it's just a whole it's a whole shit show. And I just found my groove there for several years, and in that expat community, and it's essentially guys that just don't want to come back here anymore, man. They got tired of like the lies that are presented back here too. At least over there, to a large extent, people don't judge you, or at least they keep it to themselves, and I think that's what attracted a lot of us over there. Was like, I can go around all day long and, be a drunk lunatic. And as long as I'm cordial and nice, because, there still is respect, traditionally drilled into that culture. Right. And I saw like a lot of like wild stuff when that respect line is crossed, man. I saw a lady boy take a baseball bat filled with nails to some Iranian dude's head. I've seen this Russian guy got sniped and pickpocketed by like 3-4 Thai girls because he started like creating beef with them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one of them started fighting, and then these other ones came in and boom, 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 boom. Before this drunk dude knew it, he was missing all of his shit. I've seen people just get whacked, like straight walk up and 45 in the back of the head. You have no idea why, dude. Mm-hmm. You're like, that guy owes somebody money. Like, and that shit happens every day over there, dude. It is wild. It's kind of like a cowboy. It was a wild east scenario, dude. And it's like everybody goes over there. The cops ain't gonna get involved in your business, so you better take care of your own shit.
Yeah, it makes sense, because if you got out of the army and you're looking for you just got out of super regimented lifestyle, you have all this gunfire and violence around you. I imagine you'd want a place where there aren't as many rules. Like in the U.S., you mentioned there's more judgment, there's more rules. You got the Karens. Karen was a huge meme during the pandemic. Ladies telling you what you can do and what you can't do, and that super judgmental look on your face. And it makes sense that coming out of that super regimented lifestyle, you would crave a form of escape and a way to relax. And I imagine the culture kind of forms to that essence of no rules. And like you said, you see some guy roll up and get hit in the head with a bat, and it's not your friend, it's not your problem. You're just like, well, I mean, that sucks, but it's not my pig, not my farm.
Yeah, par for the course. And they have a culture. I was just recently telling somebody a story about this, and they have a culture that kind of meets us too, Like in Thailand, they're not forced to go into that industry of like in Pattaya and like work that fast paced where they're going to make more money, and bar girls and, people and showgirls and, car models and all this. Like they're not forced into that. Like the traditional Thai way is very much steeped in, the old ways and tradition and all that, and they make that conscious choice. I mean, some of it is there's definitely a dark side of life there for sure. And like most of it is the person's choice. They say, I'm going to go to this industry and make money in it. And, a lot of that is the same in the contractor world. You get a lot of people that don't ever see their way out because that money gets addictive, or the byproduct, like the alcohol, the drugs, the fast lifestyle, the trauma. It just, most people don't ever really come out of that in a very positive sense.
Is there, even though a lot of people succumb to worse fates, whether it's with drugs or violence in a place like Thailand, is there something positive or interesting to say about the escapism and the drugs? And because a lot of times the conversation that surrounds drugs is super negative without any of the positive. And if there was nothing positive about drugs in the moment, people wouldn't do it because they like to have fun. They like to
True story.
release. They need an escape. Is there something positive to say about that culture that you took away from it, where you have some level of that in you, even if you aren't drinking or doing drugs now? Like there's a lifestyle, there's a way from living in that area and living around those people that has stuck with you.
Oh, absolutely. Like I love Thailand. Like from the bottom of my heart, I wish I could return to Thailand someday if travel and all these things open up, and I want to take my family back there eventually. I love the Thai way. I love the Muay Thai way. I like the culture over there, and I was drawn to it, and I made my own choices. Like, my problem with drugs and alcohol were mine to make and mine to foul up and mistake. In the way, I'm a huge personal liberties guy, dude. So I don't see any relevance into trying to control anyone else unless that person is actively trying to harm somebody or doing harm to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care. As long as it makes you happy, or you see fulfillment or something positive coming out of pursuing this for you in your life, go ahead, man. And that was what I was drawn to about that over there. There's this teeny niche of super free loving people over there, and they have this culture of non-judgment, and drugs and things like that are woven into it. And I view drugs as a tool, man. Like, I don't take any drugs anymore except for the ganj, and that's a medication for me, man, for sure. And he's like, I see drugs as a tool, man. If I didn't have a problem with alcohol, I might still enjoy it from time to time. If I didn't have a problem with certain other drugs, like if I needed certain something out of it, like it could be used for a tool, I would use it, And so I definitely see the healing efficacy and the healing benefits to a lot of drugs. I've used some of them myself, like especially like the natural compounds and hallucinogenics and things like that, mushrooms and MDMA. I don't have anything against a lot of that stuff, and I had a lot of great times and great experiences over there as well, with very loving and friendly and amazing people. So just because I had problems with it and things, that was from the trauma, and I wasn't using them correctly. I wasn't doing a lot of things correctly, And looking back on it now, I can see that stuff. The culture of Thailand in general is an amazing culture. Very respectful people. They call it the land of smiles. For a reason. Like, if most places in Thailand, you walk in and they why immediately, that's their hello to you. They'll give you things. They'll trade stuff to you just out of the kindness of their heart. They're a very loving and like family oriented culture of people. Although you see, there's an evolution in Thailand, and I haven't been back to Thailand since 2000. When was I back there? 16 maybe, or no. 18. I was back in Thailand in 2018 just for a visit. And, the corporation and the whole commercialization of the world is latching onto them too. They're addicted to Japanese and Korean culture. Why? Well, because Japanese and Korean culture is the most modern. Right? They literally, like, I know so many girls and guys, they rub this toxic stuff all over their skin so they can become more white. And it's like, why are you doing that? Because
that's the ideal in the Japanese culture. They want to become whiter.
Yes. Yeah. And in the Korean culture, and so you see that, and it's like that's destroying traditional Thai culture. And just like in America, going and shopping at these gigantic chain stores that aren't doing anything for anyone's local community, nothing. Like McDonald's and Walmart's and these places are literally upgrading and evolving their facilities during all this downturn. Right? Mm-hmm. They're not doing anything for anyone. And so giving them your money over some local commerce or local business that's established there just because it's convenient is you're selling your culture too to somebody who doesn't give a fuck about you. Just like the people in Thailand would be selling their culture to Japanese people who don't give a fuck about Thai people, in general, like the government, and the way they're going to treat them, so I love Thai culture. I love our culture. I don't like the way things are turning.
You mentioned people in Thailand that are whitening their skin to fit in with the Japanese culture. We have versions of that too, where people get plastic surgery to fit more with the filter on Instagram, where we have these things that change your face, and people are like, I want to look more like this ideal, and so we have that shit too. We're not immune to it. Far from it.
Wow. Yeah, that's exactly right, man. It's like once you realize too, and I think that's the biggest epiphany I ever came to, and I think it's the most empowering one as well, is when I realized that everything that I need I have within. You know, when you're searching for answers exogenously, right? I need a new nose that somebody else is going to put on me, right? I need a new cream to make my skin white, right? I need a new powder to make my muscles jacked. No,
Yeah.
you need to do more work. You know what I mean? Like that stuff can help, right? There is also exogenous tools. We were just talking about tools, right? Like I think last I read, the VA is using MDMA with their soldiers. They're using psilocybin as well. Okay, so they're using tools, right? There are tools put in this world for us. You don't need them, or you might need them, but you don't need them from a intrinsic sense, right? You don't need them for your happiness. You don't need them for your joy. You know, we have that stuff within, and when you're reaching outside for those things, then you're starting to form a problem, or you're already steeped in a problem.
Yeah. So something I wanted to get into is addiction, and
Yeah.
and you've been open with your online presence about your battle with drugs and alcohol, and I appreciate that, because my view of addiction when I was younger, you know, even up to when I graduated college, you know, 21, 22 years old, is that addiction equals weakness, and that the reason why I never became addicted to anything more than coffee was because I'm somehow less weak than people who have become addicted. And the more I learn about it, the more I understand that everyone has different genetic predispositions. Addiction can actually be totally affected by your circumstances, how you grow up. There are a lot of positive attributes that people have that manifest themselves in like a misfiring with addiction, where it could actually be because you have these like great energies and things about you that also led you down a path of addiction, and you weren't in a place where someone was kind of like pointing you maybe in a better direction, or the people in your life. And so for you, I was interested in, I wanted to get into how drugs and alcohol came into your life to the point where it was becoming a problem and becoming an addiction, and how did that happen? How did that transition happen from this is something that's, you know, an escape from a super fucked up and super wild and uncommon lifestyle to this is a problem, and I need to do something about it. I need to address this.
Yeah. And you know, I love to talk about this, and let me caveat it with saying, like, you know, I started out this venture when I got off the pot, so to speak, you used in 2014. I came back at the end of 2014, and initially in 2015, at the turn of the year, was when I was like, I need to seek new employment. I need to turn this around. And that was initially for myself and my family. I just needed to do better things. And then after a year of that, and then some other traumatic events, I just doubled down my effort, and I'm like, you're not going to remove me from this. And now not only am I going to do it for myself, I'm going to help other people. And so when I got into that mindset, I'm going to help other people out of this. It's like, well, I could serve veterans, right? Because they're the only people, and you know, it's a very small percentage of veterans that have combat experience, by the way. And I don't mean like one or two mortars coming into your 1,000 yards away from your position. Like that's not combat. You might be in a combat zone, but you're not experiencing that. Okay, so it's a very small percentage of actual veterans that are combat veterans. So I didn't just want to serve combat veterans. So why talk about combat? I wanted to talk about drugs, because so many of us, right, so many human beings from America and beyond have drugs interwoven into their life, whether it's prescription medications, which I've quit those, and I've been on those too, to hard drugs and hard alcohol and things like that. And even little things, right? Like I've been just as addicted, Zach, to legal substances as I've been addicted to illegal substances. So the legality has nothing to do with any of that. Okay. And all that really is a lot of like politics and money and what they use it for control measures, I believe. So like my journey with addiction was like, I didn't grow up addicted to anything. I wasn't addicted to substances. I didn't smoke weed as a kid. I didn't drink as a kid. I might have drank 5, 6, 7 times or whatever before my early 20s. So, and I didn't like it. I didn't care for it. So the substance alone didn't initially hook me in any of these cases. I don't think I ever tried one substance once and I was like, I need more of that right now, immediately, you know? Except for cocaine, maybe, because, you know, cocaine is just written into the program, right? Like, oh, that's good. Yep. Immediately we need to find more people that sell this substance, you know?
I could I have a bunch of nights where not a bunch. The nights where I have done coke in the past, I've wake up with, you know, fucking notes full of business ideas that I wrote down the night before, and your brain goes to this wild and crazy place, and you know it's like you said, it's built into the design of the drug. You put it up your nose, and then 30 minutes later, you sneak off to the bathroom and do some more, and it has a very short life of enacting, but
man. So I didn't initially get hooked to this stuff, but I got hooked to the allure of it all, right? So I was hooked from a very early age. Like, I think it's written within, you mentioned genetics, it's written within me that I am an addictive person. I'm addicted to things that I like. You know, that's it. You know, if I like you, I like you, Zach. You're a good dude. Like, I'm going to support you anywhere I go where you're mentioned, you know, and that's like my nature. So when I was like leading these deployments, and literally like you get put on a plane, and anywhere between like, so I think the quickest turnaround ever was like 9 hours. 9 hours I was in a war zone ago, and now I'm in a taxi riding down Sukhumvit to Pattaya, knowing that like a disco or a go-go, because they're 24 hours a day. Like I'm 1 hour away from all the girls and booze and to trance, house music, and underground pool halls and everything I could be in, you know? So that allure was so addictive. And I knew at the end of it, what was I going to do? I was going back to load magazines and chest rigs and guns and ride and do live this wild cowboy life I had created. So it wasn't until the novelty, and to be honest, it was like 2007, 2008. It was probably like a few years into it. 2009, I lost one of the closest friends I had with me in a helicopter accident, and outside Baghdad.
Sorry.
Yeah, and he lived with me in Thailand, and you know, that was like this. You know, like all of a sudden the novelty has all worn off, you know, and it's like, you know, he's gone, and with this thing we had created, you know, that's on the fritz, and it was like, then I started to slow down and like realize a little bit I was processing that and forced to slow down, right? Returning to the States to his funeral, forcing myself to slow down and look at this whole sheet of music that I had written and being like, oh, whoa, like, I do all these drugs every day. Like, I do all this stuff. Like, like, dude, like it was a nightmare. Like, looking back on it now, it was a nightmare soup, bro. But like in the time, you know, it was like, oh my God, you know, like the prettiest girl I've ever talked to just gave me this thing. And then I went over here and this other pretty girl that has nothing to do with this other girl wants to talk to me. And like all these people are offering me things and I'm taking, you know, it's like, it's very novel. And it was like, as I started to see my health deteriorate and I started having problems creep up and things, and then the real big push to understand that I was addicted and I was starting to serve things other than other people and myself was when like I started letting people down. You know, when I started like I didn't see my mom for several years, like I didn't see and I started losing connections, and I was letting people down even in my own circles. Like, I told them I'd show up today for this thing, and I didn't show up. Like, that's not that's shitbag behavior, you know? And so that's when I started to realize, you know, and for years after that, too, it was a joke. I was like, I know I'm going to have to say goodbye to all this stuff one day. It's not today, though.
Yeah.
And that took a couple of years to run its course too, to where I was like, finally, I redefined rock bottom so many times, dude, where I was just like, okay, this is rock bottom. I stop here, and it was finally, I found rock bottom. And when I did, I realized what it was, and I was like, yeah, I'm leaving this all behind. And it's the same mentality I had with anything, it's the same mentality I created, or not created, but I was instilled with, and I went through the military. Like, I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to quit on anybody. I wasn't going to, and then, like, once I finally got to that line, we're like, dude, I got to go back, and I can't do this by myself. Because I tried quitting so many times by myself. Quitting. Booze was the big one. It was the biggest one for me. Booze and benzos. It was definitely the biggest chemical and psychological addiction, because everything that I did in life was surrounded by booze. If I got depressed, I would crack a bottle to drown it. If I got happy, I would celebrate with booze. If I went to a game, I would have a beer. If I watched the UFC, it's like it worked its way. And then I started like, oh, if I don't do this, what do? I just sit here and watch the program,
Yeah.
Like,
It's a good point about the chemical or the physical versus the psychological addiction. I felt that a little bit with Adderall in college at a much smaller level of, I wouldn't say I was dependent on it, but I was definitely altering my behaviors to get it for a certain period where I was like, I do this to study, I do this to I go out. For me, it was a great party drug, and it was so accessible because guys on my team were prescribed it. I had never prescribed it, and I was thinking about getting a prescription, but I'm like, why should I do that when I have guys on my team that will just hand it out for free? And it wasn't their fault or anything like that. Like, we were in college, and I was asking them for it, so it's not like they were forcing me to take it. I made that decision for myself. And when I started to get closer towards graduation and closer towards the end of my baseball career, when I was winding down from the 3-4 nights a week of going out, Adderall mixed with that, and I wasn't physically dependent on it anymore. Like, I wasn't physically craving it, but my mind was like, oh, last time you were at this bar, you were fucked up and on Adderall, and now am I supposed to drink without it? Am I supposed to just like stand here and not stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, like wired and awake? And so I definitely, I felt that, not to the level and pain to which it sounds like you went through with addiction. I've experienced it though on a much a smaller level, because I don't want people to think I'm conflating the two. Like, I know how powerful addiction can be, and there's levels to where you ramp up to it, and I definitely felt that psychological hold with Adderall for sure.
Yeah, and it's weird, right? Each compound is in and of itself like different. So I've always had like a very hard mentality, dude. When I decide I love something, I love it. But when I decide like, okay, I'm done with that, I'm done with it. Okay. So, and the only ones to ever go against that programming within me, the only compounds that have ever like latched into me where I even see them in dream state, like I have to break the addiction in dreams. Okay. That's alcohol, methamphetamine, and cocaine. Those are the only three. Now, benzos I was super addicted to in a physiological standpoint, and I didn't know it. So I just thought I actually started thinking that I was suffering from some sort of central nervous system disability, from being in war, and like at that power plant I told you about, they would fucking just burn tankers of oil all day long. And so there's black smoke, and it smells like popcorn when you're like miles away. It's beautiful. But when you're close, like you're breathing in deep, full breaths of air, and you're like, I got zero oxygen out of that. I need to like run a block, and you barely make it. It's like intense. So I thought I was having like central nervous system problems and things, and I didn't realize that it was the benzos. They're taking away that GABA response in the brain, which helps you deal with anxiety. And I started losing my own intrinsic ability to like find homeostasis and modulate. Like a loud noise would go off, and it would send me on a whole trigger like a train ride down into fear and anxiety. And I'm like, what is going on? This is not me. And then I realized it was the benzos. And that took, when I finally was like, I'm going to cut these out of my life, it took 2 straight weeks. And 1 straight week, I couldn't even get off the couch. I couldn't get off the couch. I had to crawl or get carried to go to the bathroom and take like number 2.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I would twitch, like my arms would fly, And I was also taking like, I wasn't like on a doctor prescription. I was taking anywhere between 10 and 20 milligrams of Valium a day, sometimes hundreds. Like of Valium, throw Xanax in the hatch too, whatever, like it was a mess.
I've heard that benzos, Xanax, that stuff can be not just a bitch to get off of, but in terms of your health, a lot of people go into grand mal seizures and stuff, and it can be really dangerous to come off a substance like that. And yeah, it's going back to the when I used to think that addiction equals weakness. Like I started to think about, the reason why. I don't know exactly why. The reason I was able to dabble in some of the drugs that I did and not get physically or psychologically addicted to them, but it's not because of my willpower or because I don't see it as a source of strength. I see it as, for whatever reason, like I definitely felt certain drugs lock into me genetically where I was like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. I could feel the claws. I could feel the claws sinking into me. And for whatever reason, I was able to let go of that. And it might be genetics. It might be something my parents said to me when I was younger. But like my mom didn't say to me over and over, you're going to try cocaine one day and this is what to expect and you shouldn't do that. Like that wasn't drilled into my head. I never tried to cultivate any sort of willpower against drugs. And it just happened. Like my biological makeup, the experiences that I've had up to that point did not lead to me becoming addicted to those substances long term, which I'm grateful for. And that's not strength or weakness. A lot of times that's, experience, that's genetic luck of the draw. That's a combination of shit. And hearing people talk about addiction like yourself, it helps me realign when I start to feel like I'm better than other people in some way, or I somehow superior because I haven't, knock on wood, been addicted to something other than coffee and it's so thank you. I appreciate you being so open about it.
Yeah, brother. Well, let's unpack that for a second, because I think we just came to something that's super important across what we've been talking about. We're talking about addiction and weakness, as in, it's hard to admit to certain things, right? Like there was one point in time where that would create a physiological response in me when I would say to you right there that like I've had methamphetamine before, because there's a stigma attached to that, right? And so getting around that stigma, because you got to think back to what I'm here for. I'm here to help people. I'm here to help people. Well, I'm a Steel Mace Flow coach. That's my predominant way of helping people. I'm also a Muay Thai coach and other physical systems, right? Like that's how I help. That's I want to bring what healed me and what helps heal me every day to other people who may have some similar traumas. But in the soldier community, it's the same thing, Marine, whatever. It's PTSD for so long was considered weak. Like I'm having something happen to me. I don't have an explanation for it. I don't have an answer for it. Yet I can't admit it and start finding help because people are going to call me a pussy and make fun of me and all this stuff and consider me weak. When literally that is the strongest thing you can actually do for yourself and your community, is to admit you have a problem, if you do have a problem, or admit that you've gone through a traumatic experience, and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to face it, even if it kills me. Because I had to go into those waters just to get off the drugs. I was like, I read through forums, Zach. Like benzos is a big one, and so was Effexor. I was on Effexor for bipolar stuff. And I would go through these forums because I wanted to get off it. And so I'm reading through these forums of all these people like, oh, you know, like my husband's never going to get off it. And there's all this fear and there's so much. And like, if I would have stuck to those forums, I would have never gotten off the shit. You know, it's like I had to say, you know what? Good night with that. Once I get enough information, okay, yeah, Adam, you've been through hard stuff before. I'm going to turn around and face it. And if it fucking kills me, it kills me. And I got through every single one of them. You know, I'm here. You know, so, and like that's the strongest thing a person could do is to go either ask for help, and that's a big problem for me, even to this day sometimes, right? Turning around and saying to somebody like, okay, I don't have what it takes inside for this one thing. I need you for it. You know, I need you to help me out on this. And that's a strong thing. Yeah. And so is it a strong thing to admit we have an addiction problem so that others, at least that are strong people as well, they gravitate toward us and say, hey, that's a strong person. I want to help that strong person out because they're in need, right? Because they're in need. And it's the weak people. I'm not saying that people are weak, but it's the people that serve weakness that inherently make fun of others for venturing out into these unknown waters and saying like, hey man, look, I couldn't quit drinking booze by myself. I needed to live with my friend for a long time and quit it. You know, I needed to be nurtured back on my feet so that I could take care of the things I can take care of, and then they can watch me in that one aspect. Right? Yeah. Like so different things in there, you know, and I think that's these cultural stigmas we have on things. It's like, so what's wrong with admitting you have a problem controlling your booze? Like, aren't you just being preemptive and looking to avoid problems down the road by doing that? And I think people who do that should be commended. You know, it's better than hiding our ego and our stuff inside. You know, it doesn't mean you have to admit that shit to everybody. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe you shouldn't, you know, depending on your career and what culture you're into and all this, right? You know, for me, I want to help people. So what I'm trying to do, and I am helping people. So what I'm doing is gravitating people to me by saying, hey guys, look, you see me now? Like, do I look weak? Do I look like I serve weaknesses constantly? No. But you want to know, I have weaknesses in me, and I came from an area of many weaknesses, and you have to address those and be honest about them and say like, look, my legs are weak. I need to do lunges. You know, if you say, you know what I mean? If you don't like lunges and say, my fucking legs are strong enough. Well, like, no, they're not, dude. You're running from your lunges.
Yeah, and that, you know, that brings me to Steel Mace, because I want to be conscious of your time. And so in the last 10 or 11 minutes, that I want to direct people to what it is that you do. And you have Northeastern Primal Life. You have the Ludus Combat Club, and you're also an instructor on steelmaceflow.com. And I've taken many of your classes through the pandemic, and that has led me to other instructors like Jamie and Kristen. I just took a recorded class with Kristen last night, and I felt the pain in my legs where we were going back and forth first without the mace and pretending like there's a roof over your head and lunging forwards and backwards, and then you put the mace in your hand and you're striking and you're bringing it back, and you're like, fuck, I'm carrying something that's 10 pounds and my legs are burning like more than trying to squat 400 pounds right now. Like, it is fucking absurd. And so these last 10 minutes, I wanted to get into, and Steel Mace could be a whole 2-3 hour conversation. Round 2, we can definitely get into that. But could you give people a brief overview of how you got into Steel Mace Flow and the situation you've got going on both online and with the in-person gym in Plattsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd love to. And you know, the whole conversation we've had up to this point kind of leads and segues into why Steel Mace Flow works for me and why it worked for me, why I was drawn to it. Leo was doing his thing. Leo Savage, founder of Steel Mace Flow, started doing his thing, and like right around the time I started changing my ways, right? And he started evolving it over several years. And then when I came in and was alerted to him in like 2016, I found out what the mace was. It wasn't until like about midway September or so, 2017, when I finally picked that mace up and started doing mace moves with it and starting building what I am today with the mace. And what initially drew me to it was I was infatuated with Leo. So I was watching he was always doing these lives. He was always talking. He was always telling us stories about his trauma. And, I saw certain connections through him and me when he told his stories. He had a lot of trauma from his childhood, and he had a lot of trauma in the background of him. And he was saying this system he's created and this mace really has healed him. And, and he was doing it from a place of emotional freedom and non-stigma and non-judgment. It was beautiful. There was no dogma that I could tell initially there, and it was a very much a free enterprise. And then when I finally got to work with Leo and I started establishing myself in Steel Mace Flow community, it was a community that's awarded freedom above all else. If you feel strong in this place and you tell me you do, who am I to say that's wrong for you, right? And it's a movement and a language and a system of movement that allows us to independently express our nature, right? I am Adam. I am a Steel Mace Flow coach, and I'm angry today. You see it in my mace work. I don't have to open my mouth, right? I'm pounding the thing on the ground, and then there's some days I'm whimsically floating around, and, the naysayers out there can say, oh, well, that's feminine, yes, it is. I wanted to feel feminine. I just was watching the most beautiful ballerina dance, and I wanted to do that with a steel mace, with my structure, with what I can do to it, right? And so, I think I believe that, there's something in that for folks, especially nowadays, right? The system that preaches freedom, the system, not only does it preach creative freedom, right? It frees your body. My shoulders and elbows could not do that before I started, right? It's a mobilizing system. You get strong, your legs are burning, you're opening your body, you're opening your shoulders and these joints to some places they maybe haven't been open to since you were a younger person. And so what are you doing? You're getting into those deep places where trauma is stored as well. So we're freeing trauma from the body. We're freeing trauma from the mind, because I say, Zach, that thing we just taught you with staying below the line? I want you to incorporate, but then I want you to put 3 moves to it that are Zach's moves. You know what I mean? And now you're really establishing an identity within that and creating something out of that. And since I've started Steel Mace Flow, and as it's evolved and it's gotten much bigger, it's so hard to keep track of nowadays. People are coming up and there's people that have been in it for 6 months, and I just see them. I'm like, how have I missed this person? And it's still this culture of freedom. It's still this culture of support. So there's something right in it. There's something true in it. If you see something and it spans the test of time for a while, and who knows how long that'll last. But if you see something and it spans the test of time, then it must be written in truth to some degree, especially if you detect these nodes of love, support, growth, hardship. It's not easy, you know what I mean? You don't get done an hour-long Steel Mace Flow class and say that was fun and it was easy.
Yeah, definitely
people
not.
It's like the ice tank experience. I'm so glad I did it. I'm not going to be super enthused to do another one right away.
That's what I love about it too, is that if it does feel easy for whatever reason, you can ramp that up with the way that you're gripping the ground with your feet or crushing the mace. And, the movement can be whatever level of difficulty you want it to. If you're having a day where you're maybe you just got your ass kicked in Muay Thai, or you did a heavy lift the day before, you could be more relaxed with it. And then if you feel your energy levels are super up and you're recharged, you can fucking crush the shit out of that mace. So thank you for that introduction to Mace Flow. For people listening, I mentioned at the the beginning of the podcast that I met Adam in person at the Northeastern Primal Life at your gym in Plattsburgh with the knife defense seminar, and you were kind enough to sell me a mace, which were not readily available online during the pandemic, and I have kept with it. It's been a mainstay in my workout routine. I've
Beautiful.
More kettlebell mobility stuff. I have the Muay Thai and I have Steel Mace, and you giving me that mace has had a profound impact on my life and showing me those basic movements. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to encourage everyone listening to this to go check out Adam, and I'll let you explain where the best place it is that people can follow you and donate to you and check out a class, support you in whatever way they can. So thank you for the gift of the mace, and I'll let you take it away and let people know where they can reach you out, where they can follow you, best place to support.
Excellent, brother. Yeah, and the honor's been all mine. And since meeting you that first time and spending those 2 days in that night jiu-jitsu and Aaron Giannetti knife defense seminar was awesome. And you're such a wonderful dude, man. And just having you as a student is a blessing. Being able to teach this and give it to other people, and let them serve them. And it's not going to be the exact same as it served me, right? But it does serve you, and it exists on this wide spectrum we just talked about, right? It's such a beautiful thing. And so thanks so much for having me on, man. Thanks for continuing to be a dedicated MACE student. And your donations are always well accepted, so thanks so much for that, brother. And you can check me out at steelmaceflow.com, as well as the other Steel Mace Flow educators. Like you mentioned Jamie Pinto, and it is such an amalgamation of beautiful, beautiful characters that are wildly different. Okay, so you come to see me one day and we're shredding and we're hitting battle stance, or maybe we're doing warrior walks. I like to teach a lot of basics. I like to teach a lot of level 1. I still have not graduated my level 2, although I keep taking the program, and I love doing it. I'm not in any rush there. You can check all that stuff out at steelmaceflow.com. All right, they have level 1 certifications. They have coaching certifications. They also have the links to Mace Dojo, where Mace Dojo is a digital classroom, right, hosted through a web app, where we can all congregate and do MACE together. And, it's an international community. These folks are coming from, we have students in Brazil, we have students in Croatia, we have students in the Philippines, we have coaches in the Philippines, we have educators in the Philippines, right? We have people from all over. And it's just such a cool sharing and of creative exploration as this whole thing grows. steelmaceflow.com. You can check me out at northeasternprimallife.com. That's my website. And we serve, our local community with Muay Thai and Steel Mace Flow. So just check us out there, and you can find the donation links at Steel Mace Flow and your coaches as well. And it's been a pleasure having just being a part of your podcast too, Zach, and listening and watching your program evolve too since I've known you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, brother. And like I said, I don't know yet what the summer plans are. If you guys are having another in-person workshop, whether it's knife fighting, Muay Thai, Mace Flow, I'm 100% down to make a trip out this summer. We could do a round 2 podcast in person, because this has been a fucking blast, and I know a lot of people will gain a lot of insight from your words. So thank you for being so open and sharing your experiences. Yeah,
thank you, brother. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hope it's filled with joy.
You too. I'll see you in a live. I'm going to hop back in the live, get back into it.
Right on. Nice. Cool. All right, brother.